Hi everybody, this is Leo Vallant with an editorial rewrite of one of my earliest, most important spiritually oriented blogs. So let's get started. In the spiritual community, we often hear the cliche about a general Kundalini awakening being the next great evolutionary leap forward for humanity. But the details are vague regarding what the mechanical dynamics behind such a leap might consist of. So, let's suggest that perhaps the Kundalini can be used to link into the collective consciousness. Well, how did I arrive at that hunch? Or perhaps, and the more appropriate question for now would be, why I would even want to think so. Okay, back decades ago I had some personal experiences which go a long way in explaining why I'd want to think there could be the possibility of an actual existing collective consciousness. The first instance I'll speak of was an event that confirmed to me the reality of the supernatural. And then I'll speak of some very intense and important dreams in which their content spoke directly of or from which we could infer the possibility for a collective consciousness. Now let's start with how I know there's actually a supernatural element at play. Well, way back in college I had a shared dream. Now, I'll tell you all a bit later why a shared dream would be so pivotally important, but for now, well, the credibility for believing in a shared dream depends upon the trustworthiness of two people, not just one. Well, I was sober, responsible, and getting plenty of sleep at the time of that shared dream, and so I trust my own end of the story. And then the person I shared the dream with was Anne, one of my many friends. So we need to ask ourselves whether Anne might have schemed to trick me somehow. Well, that's very doubtful, and I'll explain why. You see, Anne was best friends to Violet, Ibuya in her native Hungarian. And Violet had been something of a campus celebrity. She was quite a unique person in more than a few ways. Well, first, Violet was the type of person that people just liked, even if she was gaunt and pale. Yeah, and about that, well, she had some tragic form of heart disease that American medicine could manage but not cure. And it was supposed that she would die in the next 3 to 5 years or so. But Violet was taking this bad news in the best of all possible ways by making the most of the remainder of her short life by assembling a social circle of the nicest, most interesting people she could find. Yeah, to be invited to one of Violet's little soirees meant that you had shined in class somewhere or at some party and that the word had gotten back to Violet. Then you would not only get to know Violet better, but also all those other specially hand-picked friends of hers that you'd be able to mingle with at those charming little soirees. But yeah, remember Anne? Keep in mind that Violet didn't have the physical stamina to pull all these parties together. No, the social dynamo behind it all had been Anne. And yes, we all knew it. Really, Anne was universally admired not only for being the best friend of someone we all deeply admired, but as well as for being the willing strength that supported that charming, caring, and giving, but mostly ethereal spirit of our hostess. So it just seems obvious that Anne had too much other stuff going on than to think about playing some elaborate joke on me, who, after all, was only just one of her very many very good friends. So yes, I had a dream in which I really didn't think I was dreaming at all, but just trying to scavenge food like a starving student late at night. I had been able to somehow push through the exit doors at the back of the college cafeteria, which was next to the last of the 5 serving lines. Well, I walked from back to front through lines 5, 4, and then 3, and found no food remaining out except on line 3 where there were some puddings. But it appeared that mold was already beginning to grow on them, and so I wondered whether they could be trusted. Then coming out of the front of line 3, I met Anne, who had apparently come in through the front doors. Yes, we met as good friends, with the added spice of catching each other in a guilty moment of attempted theft, and then we laughed about it. I asked if she had seen anything on lines 1 or 2, and she said no. Then I explained the same regarding line 5, 4, and 3, but told her of the moldy puddings, but that she could make her own judgment call about the wholesomeness of it. But no, she wouldn't want to be accused of eating anything I'd walk away from. And then there was another laugh. And then we both continued on toward the back exit and the end of the dream. Well, just ahead of the 9:30 classes in the main hall of the main building, amidst all of the thronging students, I saw Anne up ahead walking toward me, and she was still about 20 feet away. And I could only imagine the look that she must have seen popping up on my face, as I was getting ready to tell her I dreamt about her, teasing the possibility there was some nasty sex dream, when, well, I saw that she got that same look on her face. And then it was like we both realized at the same time what had happened. We're so lucky that both of us simultaneously tried talking over the other. I told about the dream from my perspective and she from hers. I was telling her where she came from, what she said, and she did the same in regards to me. And because we were both speaking at once, there could not be the subsequent doubts about how one of us led and the other one only just followed with me toos and yes sure's. Okay, now how is a shared dream so important? Well, it either proves that there can be objectively verifiable out-of-body projections, or it means that some common intelligence arranged that we both dream from within the same dream scene. Well, I prefer the second scenario, the common dream scene option, because, well, out-of-body projections in practice aren't really all that simple, but that one can only exit the physical body by using an astral body. And then that opens up your perceptions to both physical and astral content. So when astrally projecting, you never just see things the way they are in physical reality, but there is nearly always an overlay of astral oddities to deal with. Yeah, read the classics on astral projection by Oliver Fox, Sylvan Muldoon, and Robert Monroe. They all mention it. But if it were a shared dream, then the cafeteria could have been presented to appear exactly like the real cafeteria. And that's how it appeared to me and Anne. And we know that dreams can be great at exactly duplicating reality. You see, in the domain of lucid dreaming, there's what we call false awakenings. You see, the higher dream mind really tries to discourage too much lucid dreaming, probably because dreams that ordinarily occur are planned and have some purpose. But lucid dreamers, once they become lucid, they no longer take the ordinary dreams seriously anymore. Yeah, the intelligence that creates our dreams apparently think that lucid dreamers can be overly dismissive of the content that took time and effort for the dream mind to produce. So, the tactic that the dream mind uses to get the lucid dreamers back into their scheduled dream is that it simulates waking them up, apparently in their own bedrooms and with the morning sun shining in through the curtains. It's happened to me more than a few times. You naturally think, oh damn, I woke up. And then you just start going through your early morning routine, and the next thing you know, you're led back into dreamland as though it's part of your ordinary day. But the point here is that when you have a false awakening dream, well, your bedroom, bathroom, and kitchen, or whatever, are all flawlessly recreated. Even if you do a reality check, is this real or is it a dream? Well, it would probably fool you. Even the best lucid dreamers are fooled by false awakenings. So, because the cafeteria was so correct, I would have to think it a dream. And then it would have had to have been a dream with a common dream mind coordinator staging it for both Anne and myself. And if it can be common to two people, then might it not be collective for all? But then there's the big dreams that I've had which hint at a collective consciousness. In the first dream, back when I was still a young man and not very philosophically sophisticated, I came upon the grave of one of Europe's greatest thinkers, and it had been defaced with graffiti saying that Erasmus would not live beyond the grave. Well, I instantly muttered that everybody lives beyond the grave. But whatever higher wisdom it was that had been directing that dream wasn't going to allow me to get away with such an unfounded assertion as that. No, not without some kind of a challenge. And so suddenly, a large oak tree that stood up on the crest of the graveyard slope erupted into flames of multicolored lights, and out of it billowed a voice that said, "Not all men will live beyond the grave, but Erasmus will." Oh, I need to mention some details to give you some idea of just how significant that fiery tree and voice must have been in the context of this dream. Well, the instant the tree lit up, my legs gave out from beneath me and I came crashing down on my kneecaps on what seemed like hard granite. But I felt no pain. Also, tears sprayed from my eyes. But I felt no emotion, which puzzled me even at the time. One would suppose that I'd been speechless in awe. But since I felt no overwhelming emotions, well, I was intellectually quite curious about the mortality issue that the tree had brought forward, and so without any hesitation I asked, well, then what about me? Will I live beyond the grave? Well, the tree didn't immediately give me an answer, seemingly wishing that I should have a little time to contemplate just how possibly disturbing certain answers to that question might be for me. And the tree's apparent point was not lost upon me, and I got really nervous really fast. But finally the tree spoke and said, "Yes, you too will live beyond the grave, but remember one thing. Birth is but an illusion, and Christ is the life in all things." Now, even at the time, I didn't see the reference to Christ as being in regards to the historical Jesus of Nazareth, but rather I interpreted it as referring to the idea of Christ as the living vine of life, and not just the life of the Christian community, but all sentient life in the universe. Some kind of a cosmic Christ, a unifying consciousness interpenetrating all things with its life principle, structuring and organizing raw, rude matter and animating it with self-awareness and the propensity for conglomerating into larger and larger, coherently coordinated organic entities. If there is a collective consciousness, then its central node would be this Christ, a cosmic Christ. Then there was a second big dream not many years after the first. I appeared to be in a sparse landscape that seemed as dry as some areas in North Africa, the Near East, or the American Southwest. But there were still some clumps of grass, some bushes, and a tree here and there. I seemed to have just arrived on this dream scene when suddenly this young man appeared just in front of me, so close within my personal space that it made me feel a bit uncomfortable. But what instantly caught my attention was the young man's boundless smile. It radiated with what seemed a fathomless joy. The young man, in appearance, wasn't very impressive. He was thin to the point of emaciation, dark, but one would say more brown than black, with a narrow face and a thin nose, and for a beard he just had a few curly hairs on his chin. But I could not help but be moved by his complete happiness. In this dream, unlike the other, I seemed to have been rendered speechless. Well, since I had nothing to say, the young man turned and began walking off. But before he was 20 meters away, the same voice as from the other dream spoke up and said from out of the blue, "He went into the wilderness and became one." Well, with that, the young man developed a silver blue aura. And then what seemed more remarkable was that the nearby grasses and bushes began picking up that same silver blue aura. And then I noticed that even the trees out in the distance began to shine silver blue. It became clear to me that everything that was alive had the same aura and that it was connected and centered on him. I had a hunch at the time that he was experiencing all that as part of himself, that he felt the oneness, that he was the oneness. And maybe that's what made him so happy, or was it being so happy that made him one with all things? Also, I might add that this dream is suggestive of what we hear about some traditions of shamanism, whereby it's reported that some shamans can transform into crows or cats or coyotes or whatever. But what I suspect is really happening is only that a shaman can opportunistically reach his or her consciousness out and partake of the perceptions of crows and cats or coyotes or whatever else is already out there and part of the landscape which the shaman is concerned with knowing about. So yes, while it is likely one can feel all things, while one is embodying the oneness, still, when it comes to actually seeing and hearing stuff using spatial and temporal references that we can usefully understand and apply to our objective, goal-oriented endeavors, well, then it just makes sense that our consciousness of all things would make special use of life organisms that come with well-developed organs of perception and with brains that process such perceptions against references in space and time that we can usefully relate to. Yeah, that if a shaman wants a bird's eye big picture look at things, he can look through the eyes of a bird. And he can save the cats and coyotes for when he wants a closer look or listen. Now, I mentioned these dreams and these assertions from the shamanistic traditions to point out that spirituality may have an external and objective application. But most of the spirituality we hear about today is directed inwards, towards subjective mystical experiences. Now, of course, mystical experiences are interesting in that people who've had mystical experiences claim that in their moments of excitement that they knew all things and that all truths had been revealed to them. Yeah, cool, huh? However, the problem arises that they can provide few details after the fact. The literature of mysticism gives this a name: ineffability. William James, a professor of psychology at Harvard University, in his classic Varieties of Religious Experience, circa 1905, talks a great deal about ineffability. The consequence of ineffability is that it turns the mystical experience essentially into a purely aesthetic, even sensual experience, a super high buzz, but which in practical terms is good for nothing, or even damaging in the sense that mystics may often become addicted to the purely sensual experience, while ignoring their social duties and obligations. You know, like students getting high instead of doing their homework. So do we want to use our Kundalini to look inwards into ourselves, or outwards into our world and our society? Looking inwards has been the typical direction. Most popular thinking these days seems fully on board with the notion that all wisdom comes from within, no matter how foolishly we see people actually behaving who act solely according to their own internal guidance. We need to ask ourselves what we can learn from ourselves that we don't already know. We get nothing new by watching old reruns over and over again. Self-inquiry is a labyrinth that can only circle the same old grounds over and over again. So, if we want to put the Kundalini to any positive use, we must point it outwards and experience where we have never experienced before. Right? True civilization could become an achievable possibility if humanity could be unified by a tangible shared collective consciousness. Looking outwards to others beyond ourselves will take us in that direction. Looking inwards is like looking backwards. We can't take that next great evolutionary leap forwards by always backtracking over our failures and shortfalls. The ancient wisdoms, quite frankly, got us into the mess where we find ourselves today. With this surge in Kundalini awakenings, we need to configure a new path forwards. Looking outwards is the way to go. Looking inwards will only show us who the devil's still in our way. Well, that's my video. Thanks, everybody. I hope you all enjoyed it. I'll try to come up with something new. It's soon. I'll try to. Thank you.